So I overheard, I think it was Alex said you liked, Augustine, you liked the Confessions? Is everybody finding him pretty easy to follow, even though he goes off on little sort of philosophical tangents, exploring? I don't know, but my parents told me I did this, and I believe them. And I know this is true because I see other babies do the same thing. And so, like, yes, Augustine. But before we dive in, let's look at our art of the week. This is another Good Shepherd. Good job. You're getting to see a lot of these. I told you we would. This is a really lovely one. It is in a chapel in Ravenna in Italy. As the empire started falling apart, they moved a lot of the government functions to the town of Ravenna in northern Italy because Rome was kind of a wasteland, especially after it was sacked in the year 410, which I will talk about again. And so Ravenna became a pretty important place because a lot of the government was there. And this picture, this is in chapel that's covered in pictures, and they're all mosaics. This is a mosaic. Little tiny stones all put in there of different colors, which amazes, I know I'm going on and on about that. It just amazes me that you could, I mean, the grass, the ground has different colors. There's shadows, and they did it all with little pieces of rock. This is amazing to me. This is the shape because it's over a doorway. It's a little concave alcove above a doorway, this Good Shepherd. And we kind of stepped up our game here. This is around the year 400. So this is probably around the year, Augustine is writing this book, okay, roughly. And it's quite elaborate. We saw the statue. We saw the very rudimentary sketch on the catacomb. But this is lovely. We have the shepherd, and he's got 3 sheep on each side, and he has this very nice artistic little triangle arrangement. And I love this. He's scratching one of them under the chin. It's so sweet. This is what we do to animals today. You know what I mean? Things don't change. But we see some elements coming in, like he has the halo that we identify often with medieval art. Saints, Jesus, Mary, have the halo to designate that he's a special person. And so, this lovely mosaic, another Good Shepherd that was probably there or being made or about to be made when Augustine was writing his autobiography. All right, I'll put it here. Which, let's talk about. So if I had to give a subtitle to the Confessions or sum it up in a sentence, I would say, we love the wrong things, and we don't know which are the right things. And this leads to all our problems. Augustine is a man just like people today, and he loves the wrong things. He doesn't know what's the right thing to love. He loves things that don't last. He loves things that aren't true. He loves things just because they make him temporarily happy. And he doesn't know what are the right things to love. And he goes through a very painful process of learning to love the right things. So he starts out, we were just joking, he starts out with his babyhood, right? But he starts out even before infancy with something else. He starts out with God. This is wonderful because we all exist because God made us. We exist because God exists. And so I want to read the first paragraph of Confessions to you. Can any praise be worthy of the Lord's majesty? How magnificent his strength, how inscrutable his wisdom. Now, I don't know about your version, but in mine, all of that is in italics, and there's a footnote telling me he's quoting Psalm 145. Does yours indicate when he's quoting scripture? Okay, good. Well, mine's a really old, yeah. I don't even know that mine's the same translator, but that was just a good one that I found online for you guys. So you know what? So my words might not be exactly the same as your words, Alex. Alex, can I just? No, your translator is different than mine. So, but don't be thrown. It's the same. It's the same idea. No, this is the beginning of book 1. The very beginning of book 1, chapter 1. So he quoted scripture, and then he starts talking. Man is one of your creatures, Lord, and his instinct is to praise you. He bears about him the mark of death, the sign of his own sin, to remind him that you thwart the proud. But still, since he is a part of your creation, he wishes to praise you. The thought of you stirs him so deeply that he cannot be content unless he praises you. Because you made us for yourself, and our hearts find no peace until they rest in you. This is probably the most famous line of any of St. Augustine's writings. You made us for yourself, and our hearts find no peace until they rest in you. He's going to tell us the story of no peace and finding rest. And there was a country song some time ago, looking for love in all the wrong places. This is his theme song. He's looking for love in all the wrong places. But you made us for yourself, and our hearts find no peace until they rest in you. I'm sorry. You made us for yourself. So in Latin, most of you are taking Latin. Most of you are studying Latin, probably. So you made us for yourself, and you expect toward, okay? But it's in the Latin, it's odd. What does odd mean? Towards. You made us toward yourself. All right. In other words, not just for him. Like we're for him. He owns us. He's our creator. You made us to move toward you. That's what he says in Latin. And we don't find any rest until we move toward him. Fortunately, this is just me talking, not Augustine. The father is like the father in the prodigal son story who runs out to meet you when you move towards him. But nonetheless, this is what Augustine says. You made us to be directed toward you. And every time we get directed to something else, there will be no rest and there will be no peace. This is how he chooses to begin his autobiography. And I think it's not an accident. It's because it sounds pretty. He really means this is the story. This is my story. That I found peace eventually, but it was a long process. Now, I'm going to stop there. I decided on a whim to switch up writing assignments because we only have 3 more times after today. We only have 2 more times after today. So if I give you a writing assignment this week, and you give it to me next week, and then I can give it back to you the final week, do you see what I mean? But it means you're going to have to kind of hustle just a tad to do it, but I think you can do it, all right? So I believe in you. If for some reason something comes up and you don't get it, you can always email it to me and I can email it back, okay? But I just thought this would be a good way to get our final one in. So could everybody just take a moment and turn with me to week 29, which is on page 91. Because that's the week I was going to give the assignment, and I just changed it. Because you wouldn't want to not have one more paper. It is only mid-April. You could write one more paper. Anyway, but this is another one of these exercises. Okay, you just did an encomium and invective for me. Not and, or. This is the crea. Some of you may have done this with me last year. You may remember. A crea is an elaboration on a saying. So a proverb or a quote or something like that. I would like you to use as you're saying the quote I just read, which is after this. But let me tell you a little bit about what these papers look like, okay? I've got an example right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the top, and I'm going to read what the section is called, and then look down where it says example from Aphthonius, and I'm going to read his example, okay? Everybody follow me? So the first thing we do is state the saying, right? So you say, Augustine said, blah, blah, blah. Here's the example from Aphthonius. It says, Isocrates said that the root of education is bitter, its fruit sweet. That's the saying. Isocrates said the root of education is bitter, but its fruit sweet. Now, up above, it says, first section, praise for the author. We want to say something nice about the person who said it. Here's his example. It is right to admire Isocrates for his art, for he gave it a most glorious name and proved its greatness by his practice of it. By the way, rhetoric is his art. He made the art famous. He did not owe his fame to it. To go through the benefits he conferred on human life by giving laws to kings and advice to individuals would be too long. I will speak only of his wise saying on education. Say something nice about the author of the saying. You don't have to tell me everything about them. Just say they're worthy. Okay. Next section is called paraphrase of the saying. Say it again, but in your own words. Here's how he says it. The lover of education, he says, labors at first, but those labors end in profit. This was his wise saying, and we shall show our admiration in what follows. So he just said the saying in different words. Done. Next section, causes or reasons for the saying. Why would someone say this? Why would someone say that the root of education is bitter, but its fruit sweet? Here's his example. The lovers of education are enrolled with the leaders of education, whom it is fearful to approach, though to desert them is foolish. Fear always waits on boys, both when they are present and in anticipation. From teachers, the attendants take over, fearful to behold, more fearful when inflicting punishment. There's a lot of fear in this student. Do you recall Augustine talking about how often he was beaten? Right? It is notorious with some of my other students in years past that I assure them, and perhaps I've assured you, there will be no beatings here. You know, if you don't bring your paper on time, there will be no beatings. I might give you a look. Probably not even that. But there will be no beatings because the vast majority of students through the ages have been beaten. Like, you might get a spanking for disobeying, but you get a spanking for getting your Latin endings wrong. Most people don't subscribe to this anymore. Or your parents in some school will get mad at the teacher instead of mad at you. But anyway, this is a fear. Remember, the root of education is bitter. So he's talking about the fear that accompanies it. Let's keep going. Fear precedes the experience and punishment follows on fear. What the boys do wrong, they punish. What the boys do well, they take as a matter of course. Fathers are harsher than attendants, examining their ways, telling them to make progress, viewing the marketplace with suspicion. And if punishment is needed, they take no account of human nature. But by these experiences, the boy, when he reaches adulthood, is crowned with virtue. All right. Now, up above it says a contrast. Listen to what he does next. He does a little contrast. But if someone, because he fears these things, flees from his teachers, absconds from his parents, avoids his attendants, he is utterly deprived of eloquence. Along with his fear, he has set aside eloquence. All these things swayed Isocrates' judgment when he called the root of education bitter. His contrast is, well, what if you don't subject yourself to that bitter root? You're a dunce. You're uneducated. You're uneloquent. You're the opposite of everything that is the fruit of that education. Okay. Next section, a comparison. Can you compare it to something? Aphthonius says, for just as those who work the land laboriously sow the seed in the earth and gather the crops with greater joy, in the same way those who strive for education by their toil acquire the subsequent renown. He says it's like farming. You know, it's a bummer. You get up early, you work hard, you got to till the earth, you got to fertilize it, and you got to spread the seed, everything. But when you gather all the crops into your barn, the fruit of it is sweet, of all that hard work. Yes?
I don't think I really understand the difference between a contrast and comparison. Both seem to be talking about the opposite of that. Contrast is
oh, the contrast really was the part where he said, but if you run, if you run from your, his contrast was stuck in with the reasons. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I think his contrast was, but if you flee because you're afraid, that would be the contrast of submitting yourself to it. Okay, then the next section, an example. You might say, what is the difference between a comparison and an example? A comparison is general, like farmers in general do this. Now he's going to give an example, a specific person. His specific example is Demosthenes. Do some of you from last year remember? This is the guy, he was a famous Greek orator, but he was a very poor specimen to become a public speaker because he stuttered. It said he had a weak chest, which apparently meant he just couldn't talk very loud. He didn't really project, but he wants to be a public speaker. So he goes and he puts pebbles in his mouth so that it makes his mouth work really hard to pronounce the words. And he goes and stands on the seashore and he tries to talk above the noise of the ocean, loud. And then he would periodically shave one side of his head, which was just kind of disgraceful. And then he wouldn't want to go out in public till it grew back in, and he'd just do nothing but study and practice. He was like, well, I can't go out because my head, so might as well practice some more. And that's the example he's going to use. Yes?
That's really smart. Like, even Demosthenes, even like hundreds and hundreds of years ago, is using a trick that orators and singers use now.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like, when I was doing vocal lessons, my vocal teacher told me you have to sing to the wall. Sing like you're singing to the wall, and far away. Reach to the wall.
Yes. So here's how Demosthenes went through the bitter roots to get to the sweet fruit. It says, consider Demosthenes' career, which was more devoted to toil than that of any orator and more glorious than that of any. So great was his commitment that he even deprived his head of its adornment, thinking the best adornment is that from virtue. And he devoted to toil what others devote to enjoyment. All right, next up, testimony. Does anyone say anything about this subject? That education can be tough, but it bears good fruit. It says, for this reason, one must admire Hesiod, who said that the road to virtue is hard, but the summit easy, expressing the same wise judgment as Isocrates. For what Hesiod represented as road, Isocrates called the route. Both disclose the same opinion, though in different words. And then an epilogue, wrap it up. Those who consider these points must admire Isocrates for his outstandingly wise saying on education. That's it. That's it. Assignment, it says underneath it, write a crea on the following a statement from Augustine in Book 1, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts find no peace until they rest in you. Does this assignment make sense to everybody? All right. I would like you to include all our figures of speech. That just made Alex have a like, no, I'm sorry. He's choking and I'm mocking him. I am a terrible teacher. I want you to include personification, anaphora, litotes, metaphor, antithesis. Does anybody need me to explain any of those? Okay, so a comparison is in general. And Karsten, it's totally okay if I can't find every single section in your Crea. Do you know what I mean? If you compress a couple of sections, ancient writers did it all the time. Okay, so don't kill yourself. It's like, oh, I just don't know what the difference is. Don't. But the idea is that an example is a general universal. No, am I saying it right? Yeah, I already. No, a comparison is a general universal. An example is a specific person. So for this one, an example might be okay, wax poet. Just as the boat is tossed on the waves until it makes harbor, a harbor enclosed where it can find peace, so is the heart that's out on the tumultuous seas of life until it rests in the harbor. That'd be very general. But then, as an example, I might find an actual human being who, like from fiction or nonfiction, who had this sort of life. All right, you could use Augustine himself, honestly. And then a testimony is, what does someone else agree with this? It could be the Bible. It could be any other book that you know. Does someone else say something similar, seem to agree with it? Does that make sense, Karsten? So we have a universal, a specific person, and then a person who's not exemplifying the statement, but they're said something that agreed with it. Yes.
I think this is where this is why I had to ask the question, like, hey, I don't really understand because I didn't notice that they had combined
Yes.
causes.
Yes.
So I was just wondering, is those work laboriously? Is that the contrast?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a contrast.
No. For whatever reason, they're combined in this example that I stole off the internet, and I don't know why.
I'm going to do the same thing. It works out pretty well.
Okay.
This is why you do it.
And this is, yes, and this is what happens when you do it. Or this is what happens when you don't, the contrast. Okay. So back to Augustine. As we mentioned just a minute ago, he's very speculative, we would say. He likes to philosophize. And an example of this is, this is section 2, chapter 2, I guess, of book 1. How shall I call upon my God for aid when the call I make is for my Lord and God to come into myself? What place is there in me to which my God can come? What place that can receive the God who made heaven and earth? Does this mean, O Lord my God, that there is in me something fit to contain you? But then in the next paragraph, he says, is it rather that I should not exist unless I existed in you? And then partway through the first paragraph of chapter 3, he says, or is it that you have no need to be contained in anything, because you contain all things in yourself and fill them by reason of the very fact that you contain them? Then the end of that paragraph says, when you pour yourself out over us, you are not drawn down to us, but you draw us up to yourself. You are not scattered away, but you gather us together. He says, is it that I have something in me that contain God? As we say that, I have Jesus in my heart, and it gives me this mental image of it's like I'm carrying around, like I've got him in my purse or in my pocket or something. Jesus in my heart. But then if you think about, no, he has me. He contains all. He contains me. I don't contain him. Does that make sense? I'm not saying one is more true than the other necessarily. It's just kind of a flipped way of thinking about it. And there's a famous story about Augustine, who you read in the first 3 books that he had an excellent education, good job, great speaker, wrote just myriad books on many subjects. Brilliant man. But he had a problem, and this is why I love Augustine, because I'm no Augustine, but I have a similar problem as I want to know everything. It really makes me sad that I can't know everything. Okay, that's stupid things that I like to know. Augustine liked to know, and he was way farther on the path farther than I am of the knowing. But they say once he was walking along the beach, and there's a kid there playing in the sand, with a pail and shovel and digging a hole. And the kid starts taking buckets of water from the ocean and dumping them in the hole. And Augustine says, "What you doing there, little boy?" "I'm putting the ocean in the hole." And Augustine, like, "Oh, you silly boy, the ocean won't fit in that hole." And he walks away and he hears a voice behind him. It's not the little boy's voice anymore. But the voice says, "And you too, Augustine. Do you think you can put all the riches of wisdom and knowledge in your brain?" And he turned around and the boy was gone. There was an angel there. This is the story. I don't know that this cured Augustine of his burning desire to know, because he never stopped learning and knowing. But reminding him of his place. You're a creature. You will never, ever, ever know everything. Ever, because then you'd be God. And you can't be God. So there will always be something you don't know. And so if you're driven, if any of you have this problem as well, you just would want to know, there must be limits on it. And so becoming comfortable with your creaturely limits, that you will never read every book, you'll never know everything. Deal with it. And it's okay. It's okay. Because that too can be a love of the wrong thing. You can love that too much too. So anyway, so Augustine likes to, as you can see, he's kind of brainiac, he likes to dig into things. But eventually he gets around to starting to talk about his actual life. However, I gotta read this. This is in chapter 5, final paragraph of chapter 5 in mine. "My soul is like a house, too small for you to enter, but I pray you to enlarge it. It is in ruins, but I ask you to remake it. It contains much that you will not be pleased to see. This I know and do not hide." I love this. It reminded me, in the Catholic Mass, there is a point right before communion. You're getting ready to take communion, and the whole congregation says, "I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my soul shall be healed." Paraphrasing what the centurion says to Jesus, "I'm not worthy for you to enter my roof. Say the word," and is it his servant or is the child? Is the synagogue ruler has the child. The centurion has a servant. I always get this mixed up. Anyway, say with the word, and he will be healed. And so they say this every week. "I am not worthy, but say the word, and my soul shall be healed." And I feel like Augustine is saying something like that. My soul is like a house. It's small for you. It's really kind of run down, but I won't hide the fact that it's kind of run down from you if you will be so good to come in. Okay, then he starts talking about his personal history. And we were joking about this as you guys were coming in. And he does say it. He's like, "Oh no, my parents tell me I used to cry when I was a baby. Don't really remember. But other babies cry, so I'm pretty sure I cried." But it brings him to an interesting reflection. This is the first question I asked you. What is Augustine's view on the innocence of babies and children?
I thought this was so good. Okay, so first he says, "I'm not as pure of sin, not even an infant of one day on the earth." And then he says, "The feebleness of infant limbs is innocent, not the infant's body."
It was at the end of a paragraph for you? Was it that last? Because I have a version. Mine says.
No, it's in the middle.
Oh, it's in the middle. Okay, that may be, he may say the same thing. And
so the feebleness of infant limbs is innocent, not the infant's mind. I personally watched and studied a jealous baby.
Oh, that is the place. Yeah, that is actually the place. It's a paragraph break for me. And my version says, "This shows that if babies are innocent, it is not for lack of will to do harm, but for lack of strength. That baby smack you around if it could. It just can't move right now, but I want to smack you around so much. Um, and okay, if any of you have younger siblings, if you are old enough to remember the babyhood of younger siblings, or you have cousins, or nieces, nephews, whatever, you know that. And Augustine even says this. He says, "Was it wrong? Is it a sin for a baby to cry because it's hungry?" He says, "Well, oh, here, let me read it because his words are funnier than mine. Just a second, Alex. Don't forget it." He says, "Was it a sin to cry when I wanted to feed at the breast? I am too old now to feed on mother's milk, but if I were to cry for the kind of food suited to my age, others would rightly laugh me to scorn and remonstrate with me. If I started crying because I wanted a steak, get a grip. Stop." He says, "So then too, I deserved a scolding for what I did. But since I could not have understood the scolding, it would have been unreasonable and most unusual to rebuke me. We root out these faults and discard them as we grow up. And this is proof that they are faults. Because I've never seen a man purposely throw out the good when he clears away the bad. The fact that we train children to stop behaving that way as they get older shows that we don't really value behaving that way. And if you cried every time you were uncomfortable or hungry, somebody needs to have a talk with you. But not when you're a baby." And so he says, but yet it is a fault because we get rid of it. What were we going to say, Alex?
On that topic first, that's where he does bring in the semi-biblical or not virtue, but idea of coming of age, where you take your sins into your hands. But I really love how he puts everything that he did as a child into such adult terms. Let's see here. I'm going to start here in paragraph 8, midway here. "So I threw my limbs about and uttered sounds, signs resembling my wishes, the small number of signs of which I was able, or of which I was capable, but such signs as lay in my power to use, for there is no real resemblance. When I did not get my way, either because I was not understood or lest it be harmful for me, I used to be indignant with my seniors for their disobedience, and with free people who were not slaves to my interests, and I would revenge myself upon them by weeping." That this way of infant, that this is the way of infants I have learned from those I've been able to watch, and all that.
Yeah.
It's still, I was just enjoying the adult.
Yes, I was indignant. I'm indignant with you for not coming to pick me up out of this stroller. Yes.
What do you think about unborn children in the womb that die?
I do not know. That is a really good question. I don't know that he ever wrote about it. I think that I'm going to speculate, early church unanimously believed that unborn children were people based on the fact that John the Baptist leaps in Elizabeth's womb when Mary comes in. And because all people Augustine is sort of the pioneer of the whole original sin idea. Because all people are sinful, that without baptism, they're condemned. I don't know. An unborn child can't be baptized. Well, but babies, I mean, well, okay, yeah. But you know what? Augustine's view is not that the baby sins. The baby is sinful. It comes before it breathes its first breath. It is sinful.
We sin out of our sin nature.
Yes.
We don't have a sin nature because we sin.
This is the same thing Athanasius called our corruption. So the East still doesn't really see it the same way as the West. This idea of they don't use the term original sin, but it's original corruption. It's the death, and then sin flows out of that. Kyle, though, that is a probing question. And so everything I've just said is sort of speculating. I don't really know the answer, but Ethan has a contribution.
The day you're born into the world, born into sinfulness. Although, if you think about it this way, you're already growing in sinfulness before being born.
Because you have the nature. You're already a human. If you're human, you have the nature. And if the nature is corrupt and you partake of the nature,
God is all loving.
yes. Well, and that's, in general, I feel like that's probably Protestant belief and even modern Catholic belief. I don't think that they're so hardcore as Augustine that unbaptized babies go to hell. And the East never really said that. I think it's always safest for us to say God is just and merciful and loving, and we trust him and we don't know, but whatever he does will be good. I don't know if that's helpful, but I mean, it takes us back to there's things we can't know. Do you know what I mean? And so there's mysteries we can't search out, but if I know, okay, I don't know and I don't understand, and this, even if it seems wrong to me, it must be something wrong with me, because God will never do anything wrong.
And then there is the concept of conviction,
Yes.
where we aren't in complete control of ourselves yet.
Yes.
Maybe, but again, speculation.
I know. And
Yeah.
if you think about it this way, you're being born into the flesh. You're being born into that. The second birth is talking about this second, like the second opening of your eyes, the second, like, triumph over your body, where you're being born into God instead of born into your flesh.
So what about people that can't understand what the message of God is?
Well,
God is all loving.
Again, God, this is why in the Eastern Church, they're very fond of saying, Lord, have mercy. A lot. Like when you go to an Eastern church, it's like, Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy. Sometimes they say it 12 times in a row. Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy. Because that's our only hope. Lord, have mercy. Or the Jesus prayer, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Like that's always a useful prayer, I feel like. Jesus, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. For not only on me, but on all these people. On all these people who can't or don't or won't, for whatever reason, trust you or follow you. Okay, those are always very interesting. All right, so he says, all right, so babies do have faults. But he goes on to past babyhood going to school. And we already mentioned the beatings. Now, I'm going to be looking in section 9, chapter 9 here of book 1. If I had been beaten repeatedly as a child in school, I feel like I would probably still be angry about it, and I would blame my teachers. I had a teacher who sent me out in the hallway in first grade. I still don't know what I did wrong. It was my only reprimand. Well, one of two. The other one was stupid. The only time I ever got in trouble, and I am haunted by it. I dream about Miss Fall. She wasn't even my teacher. She came in from did you go out in the hall? I still don't know. My mother was slapped across the face by her first grade teacher and knocked her glasses off. I've heard this story many times. So my point being, if I had been mistreated more than just sent out in the hall, I feel like I would be blaming the person who did it a lot. But listen to what Augustine says. Halfway, okay, chapter 9, in my book, it's the final paragraph. It's about a third to a half a way down. We feared, okay, I'm going to start at the beginning of that. O Lord, throughout the world, men beseech you to preserve them from the rack and the hook and various similar tortures which terrify them. Some people are merely callous, but if a man clings to you with great devotion, how can his piety inspire him to find it in his heart to make light of these tortures when he loves those who dread them so fearfully? And yet, this was how our parents scoffed at the torments we boys suffered at the hands of our masters. For we feared the whip just as much as others fear the rack, and we no less than they begged you to preserve us from it. But we sinned by reading and writing and studying less than was expected of us. We lacked neither memory nor intelligence. Because of your will, O Lord, we had as much of both as was sufficient for our years, but we enjoyed playing games. He does not say, I had brutal teachers and they beat me, those dirty, rotten scoundrels. He says, yeah, we were really afraid of our teachers, but we did slack. Augustine is ready to hold nothing back. He will not try to find fault in himself. He will admit any fault he suspects he sees, including being a student and doing less than you can, less than you should. Now, that hits us home hard. You're students. Like, shoot. Is it a sin to do less than you're called to do, to be a slacker, to just get by? Is that a sin? Now, don't be driven the other direction. I don't eat, sleep, I'm stressed out all the time because I could do more. No. But I feel like when most of us, like Augustine, turn our eyes into our own hearts, we lounge around in front of the TV a little more than we need to, or we, watch those YouTube videos with the funny chickens, or the birds with arms. Love the birds with arms. And it sucks you in, and then suddenly half an hour, of birds with arms has passed, and you've laughed a lot. You're all looking at me like, it's my children put me on the birds with arms. He says, you know what? Even at my best, I'm still a sinner, right? There's fault in me. But he still admits that it's unfair. He is rotten that we were beaten. But his reason is not because it's just wrong to beat children. It is. But in chapter 10, he gives this reason. Okay, I'm going to read all of chapter 10. And yet I sinned, O Lord my God, creator and arbiter of all natural things, but arbiter only, not creator of sin. I sinned, O Lord, by disobeying my parents and the masters of whom I have spoken. For whatever purpose they had in mind, later on I might have put to good use all the things which they wanted me to learn. I was disobedient, not because I chose something better than they proposed to me, simply from the love of games. For I like to score a fine win at sport or have my ears tickled by the make-believe of the stage, which only made them itch the more. As time went on, my eyes shone more and more with the same eager curiosity, because I wanted to see the shows and the sports, which the grown-ups enjoyed. The patrons who pay for the production of these shows are held in esteem such as most parents would wish for their children. Yet, the same parents willingly allow their children to be flogged if they are distracted by these displays from the studies which are supposed to fit them to grow rich and give the same sorts of shows themselves. Are you kidding me, said Augustine. I get beaten for slipping out, playing hooky and going to the gladiator shows. But you want is to get a good job and make money to be the important sort of person who sponsors the games. So it's not the beating, it's the injustice, it's the double standard that gets him, not the beating. Okay, what time? Oh, we're okay. All right, let's skip up to, let's be done with talking about his childhood. Chapter 17. Is it chapter 17? Oh, no, chapter 13. Let's do that. Another love that distracted him. This may not appeal to you because you were actually made to read this book with me earlier this year. He just flat out enjoys it. In chapter 13, he says that all that work gave me the power, which I still have, I'm about halfway down, of reading whatever is set before me and writing whatever I wish to write. But in the later lessons, I was obliged to memorize the wanderings of a hero named Aeneas. While in the meantime, I failed to remember, listen to his examples here. I was forced to memorize the wanderings of a hero named Aeneas, while in the meantime, I failed to remember my own erratic ways. I learned to lament the death of Dido, who killed herself for love, while all the time in the midst of these things, I was dying, separated from you, my God and my life, and I shed no tears for my own plight. What could be more pitiful than an unhappy wretch, unaware of his own sorry state, bewailing the fate of Dido, who died for love of Aeneas, yet shedding no tears for himself as he dies for want of loving you? He says, at least, this is the second paragraph, he said, sometimes we value the literature more than the actual learning to read. He says, tell me that reading and writing are by far the better study. This must be true, for I would rather forget the wanderings of Aeneas and all that goes with them than how to read and write. Okay, there's something I wanted to read and I'm trying to find it. Just a second. Let's switch up to chapter 14. He says he loved the Aeneid. Didn't so much love Homer. Why? Because learning Greek was a pain. It's terrible. He said, as a baby, of course, I knew no Latin either, but I learned it without keeping my ears open while my nurses fondled me and laughed and played happily with me. I learned it without being forced by threat of my own wish to be able to give expression to my thoughts. I could never have done this if I had not learnt a few words, not from schoolmasters, but from people who spoke to me and listened when I delivered to their whatever thoughts I had conceived. This clearly shows that we learn better in a free spirit of curiosity than under fear and compulsion, which is pretty much educational policy today. We don't think that beating children really gets the results we want. But your law, O God, permits the free flow of curiosity to be stemmed by force. From the schoolmaster's cane to the ordeals of martyrdom, your law prescribes bitter medicine to retrieve us from the noxious pleasures which cause us to desert you. Punishment comes. The schoolmaster beats you with his cane, but it redirects your love, hopefully towards something higher. In this case, not the highest, but something better than the games, something more useful. Okay, what does Augustine see then? This is the second question I asked you, as the main sin of his childhood. He sums it up in chapter 20. Ethan. Mm-hmm.
Should not be God, but in his creatures, in myself and other created beings. So it was that I plunged into miseries, confusions, and errors.
Yes. My version says pleasure, beauty, sublimity, the sublime. Somebody asked me to define it yesterday. I don't know how. I only can give examples, but it means lofty, beautiful, on a high, existing on a higher plane. So the things that you see it or hear it and they give you goosebumps, this is sublime. A mountain landscape or moments from Bach or Beethoven, or even maybe your favorite popular song. It's just like that moment, that piano solo just gives me goosebumps. I love that. It's sublime. But my version says beauty. Yeah, that's it. That sums it up. I looked for pleasure, beauty, and truth, not in God, but in myself and other created things. And it always leads to misery. And he proceeds in book 2 to tell you a little bit about his misery. In book 2, he is no longer a young boy, he's a teenager. And he has discovered girls, and he likes them very much. And he's going to recall these sins in chapter 1, but he tells us why he's doing it. Because, I suppose we could go back and relive a sin we committed just because, oh, remember the time I did that, and take pleasure in it. And that would be a wrong way to remember it. But you could remember it and say, thank you, God, I don't want to do that sort of thing anymore. And that would be a right way to remember it. Have you ever thought, we said last week how, the holes in Jesus's hands and feet are there always. But we're not always going to grieve when we see them. Because if we were grieving eternally, it wouldn't be heaven. So at some point, we're going to be able to remember the fact that Jesus was crucified, but not be sad. Does that make sense? And but we don't know what that's. I can't remember things without being happy or sad. It's really hard to remember them dispassionately, like objectively. But we must be able to, or it wouldn't be heaven, unless our memories are wiped, and we have no reason to think our memories get wiped. There's a book by C.S. Lewis called The Great Divorce. And these people from hell go take a bus tour. They take a bus trip to heaven, and they all hate it there. They all want to go back to hell. So they're not fit for heaven. They're not suited. Anyway, there's this one place where this guy is standing there, and the guy who murdered him is there too. And the guy from hell says, what? And like, oh, we're past that. Are you angry with him? Like, no, that's just something that happened. It's something that happened. But, it all turned out okay. Because I'm here, he's here, and the guy from hell just can't understand. How can you remember it happened and not be infuriated? It's like, yeah, we don't really do that here. We know, yeah, that happened. No, it's not like that. And I feel like Augustine is trying to be that way. I'm going to look back at these things that I consider terrible things I did. But I'm not going to revel in them. It's like, oh, I miss doing that. And I'm also not going to kick myself, over and over. I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm going to say, oh, yeah, that's who I was. Isn't God lovely that he forgave me? So he says this, I must now carry my thoughts back to the abominable things I did in those days, the sins of the flesh which defiled my soul. I do this, my God, not because I love those sins, but so that I may love you. For love of your love, I shall retrace my wicked ways. The memory is bitter, but it will help me savor your sweetness, the sweetness that does not deceive, but brings real joy and never fails. For love of your love, I shall retrieve myself from the havoc of disruption, which tore me to pieces when I turned away from you. I'll do this for you, God, and also for us, for the people who are reading it and think, oh, that Augustine, he's so holy, he's so awesome. I could never be like this. I was a jerk. God uses everybody. Okay. Oh, I just answered. I'm so sorry. You should stop me. Just yell. Stop. Joseph. Why does Augustine say he wants to remember sins? Yeah, I blew that one up.
Love your philosophy, right?
Sorry, I get into it. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I think you all do because it's the one I put on the Amazon list because I couldn't find, except Hannah, you have a different one, right? Are you able to find where we are in yours? Oh, is it like a paraphrase or instead of a translation or? Well, I know, and you sent me a picture of it. It's my fault because I looked it up online. I looked at the number of pages, but anyway, I'm sorry. Well, go ahead and read the one you got. It's okay.
I mean, the last part that I actually knew where we were reading from was Aeneas and Dido. So.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, and this one I tried to tell you that was at the beginning of book 2. It was book 2, very beginning. But now I'm moving up to the second question. What do Augustine's parents value more highly than his spiritual growth? What do his parents really want for him? Yeah, they want him to get a good job. It says on Page 45. Oh, no, that doesn't do you any good. Chapter 3. In my mother's heart, okay, if you find something about his mother almost at the end of the third paragraph. In my mother's heart, you had already begun to build your temple and laid the foundations of your holy dwelling, while my father was still a catechumen and a new one at that. So in her piety, she became alarmed and apprehensive. And although I had not yet been baptized, she began to dread that I might follow in the crooked path of those who do not keep their eyes on you, but turn their backs instead. But later, okay, well, I don't even know that telling you the paragraphs helps. It says, this is the last paragraph of chapter 3, halfway through it in mine. Even my mother, who had by now escaped the center of Babylon, though she still loitered in its outskirts, did not act upon what she heard about me from her husband with the same earnestness as she had advised me about chastity. She saw that I was already infected with a disease that would become dangerous later on. But if the growth of my passions could not be cut back to the quick, she did not think it right to restrict them to the bounds of married love. This was because she was afraid that the bonds of marriage might be a hindrance to my hopes for the future. Not, of course, the hope of the life to come, which she reposed in you, but my hopes of success in my studies. Augustine is already sleeping around as a teenager. And his mother had a choice. It's like, Augustine, like Paul says, it is better to marry than to burn. If you can't control yourself, we will find you a nice young lady and you can get married. She doesn't want him to get married. Oh, that'll hold him back. May hold him back in his career. Having a wife, having kids, don't want that because we want him to have a good career. So I'm just going to have to turn a blind eye to what you're doing. Even his mom, who at this point is young in the faith. And his father is not a believer at all. Well, you know what? I got to tell you something. It's hard to be a parent. And you want your kids to do well. And it's sometimes you worry. I will give you insight. Like sometimes your mom worries. Is this going to be okay? I'm homeschooling because of various reasons. Maybe it's religious, maybe it's academic, maybe it's both. And I'm worried. Are they going to turn out okay? Will they get an okay job? Will they live in my basement for 30 years? Lord, please no. That's the feeling. Parents want their kids to do well, even Christian parents. It's hard not to get sucked into the system. My grandpa always referred to people, he said they had a good job, and good always meant they make a lot of money. And my grandpa wasn't really that sort. He was a farmer. He's a very smart man, too. But he has a good job. And that was code for he gets paid a lot. And we feel that way. Monica is no different than parents today. It's like, oh, yeah, I want my kids to have a wonderful, religious upbringing, but yet I hope they can get a job and they're okay, I hope I did this okay. And Monica's feeling that too, I think. So Augustine did something that may seem a little silly. He committed a crime. What? Yes, tell me about that. What did he do? They threw them to the pigs. They stole some guy's pears off his tree. A little band of hooligans, as my generation would say, those hooligans. Yeah.
And they even said, oh, we're just going to throw it to the pigs. We weren't even going to eat it. We just wanted to do it for the thrill of rebellion.
Just the thrill. Augustine can't let this go. He spends many pages, doesn't he, examining why in the world did I do that? Why in the world did I steal something I didn't even want just to do it? World never changes. We got gangs, whatever. People do things today for no reason. For no reason except just to be nasty, that we can see. So he says, In chapter 4, for what I stole, I already had plenty, and much better at that. And I had no wish to enjoy the things I coveted by stealing, only to enjoy the theft itself and the sin. And then he says, because he's a digger, he's a deep thinker. He says we're attracted by things in chapter 5. Good things. He uses gold, friendship, pears. All these things and their like can be occasions of sin, because good though they are of the lowest order of good. And if we are too much tempted by them, we abandon those higher and better things, your truth, your law, and you yourself, O Lord our God. I wanted something else. I didn't want God. I didn't want pears. What did I want? He says, my soul defiles itself with unchaste love when it turns away from you and looks elsewhere for things which it cannot find, pure and unsullied, except by returning to you. All who desert you and set themselves up against you merely copy you in a perverse way. But by this very act of imitation, they only show that you are the creator of all nature. And right before that, he says, pride is a pretense of superiority imitating yours. Okay, so how does he think stealing pears is copying God? A pretense, an imitation. He tells you in the next paragraph. What was it then that pleased me in that act of theft? Which of my Lord's powers did I imitate in a perverse and wicked way? Since I had no real power to break his law, what was it that I enjoyed the pretense of doing so? Like a prisoner who creates for himself the illusion of liberty by doing something wrong when he has no fear of punishment under a feeble hallucination of power. I can do anything I want. I'm going to steal those pears and throw them to the pigs because I'm in charge of my life. I can do anything I want. I call the shots. And this whole book is the story of how God is always working with him, always watching over him, always leading him. He doesn't call the shots. He's not in charge. He can't just do whatever he wants. But he has a feeling he can, of superiority to others. He also says something interesting, and this is something for all of us to keep in mind. In chapter 8, he says, I am quite sure that I would not have done it on my own. Was it then that I also enjoyed the company of those with whom I committed the crime? What do we call it when people suck us into doing something that we wouldn't do? Yes. And we have two words. When people around you force you to do something that maybe you wouldn't normally do. Peer pressure. So I didn't make this up. I don't want you to think I'm that clever. I heard someone call this, in his case, it's peer pressure. It's too good not to use. I can only use it once every 4 years, so. Yes, he suffered from peer pressure. And he even says, we do not easily laugh when we are alone. We like comrades in it. And friendship is a good. It's not the highest good. And even the best goods, if you know what I mean, the things that are the highest goods, can get twisted by sin and turn into really bad things. Friendship is a good thing. But when you use it for petty theft, and I don't know, whatever other nefarious things you and your peeps want to do, that's not a good anymore. But friendship is a good. That's what sin does. It takes everything that is good and twists it and turns it into something that's not good anymore. So this is Augustine's reflection. This is one of the most famous stories about St. Augustine. He stole the pears. But why? Why do we sometimes do things that we don't even derive any benefit from? Is it because of the comradeship? Is it because we just want to seem like we're in control? I'll do whatever I want, take that. So there. Whether it benefits us or not. For Augustine, it was pears. And it wasn't just pears, unfortunately. It's the only thing he stole. It wasn't his only problem. Okay, book 3. In book 3, he is in Carthage. He is studying in Carthage. I guess it would be the equivalent of he's gone off to college. It didn't quite work that way back then, but that's for our purposes. He's gone off to college in Carthage. And we all know, we probably have heard stories or know people who go off to college and get sucked into the college party scene. All right? It's easy to do. You're away from your parents for the first time. You have a more control over your life than you've had previously. And if you're not grounded in what you really should be doing, as Augustine wasn't, he gets sucked in. Book 3 starts, I went to Carthage, where I found myself in the midst of a hissing cauldron of lust. Nice. Hissing cauldron of lust. I had not yet fallen in love, but was in love with the idea of it. And this feeling that something was missing made me despise myself for not being more anxious to satisfy the need. I began to look around for some object of my love, since I badly wanted to love something. I want to love something. I think it's that girl, though, or that girl, or that girl, or that girl, or maybe all of them. He says, but material things which have no soul could not be true objects for my love. And honestly, even human beings that do have a soul can't be our ultimate love, can they? Because they will go away someday, or we will go away. I mean, hopefully not for eternity. We can be together, but you know what I mean? If all your hopes in this life are wrapped up in another human being, and that human being is gone, that's tough. And as a matter of fact, as a little spoiler, in books 4 through 6, Augustine is going to lose someone close to him. And it's going to make him realize, oh, friendship, that can't be the ultimate good either. So his mom keeps praying for him. Little boy's off to college. He says in chapter 3, at least he behaved far more quietly, he said, than the wreckers. That's what they're called in my translation in chapter 3. Last paragraph. I'd be curious are they the wreckers with a capital W in mine? Last paragraph of chapter 3, book 3. And he says, as you well know, Lord, I behave far more quietly than the wreckers. That's what mine says.
Oh, this is the
Final paragraph for me in chapter 3.
Yeah, I think we have different numbers of paragraphs in ours. We're like a different number.
Book 3, chapter 3. Oh, it's your chapter. Oh, your chapters aren't even. Oh, okay. When I teach this class again, I'm going to have to buy the book you're using and use it because I've put the wrong chapter numbers on here for your questions and everything. I'm so sorry.
We have 3 books, and each paragraph is labeled 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't have chapters and stuff.
Oh.
So
okay. You know what? Could I just, when we're done teaching, before you leave, just let me glance through one of your books so I can get a feel for it. Okay. Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I have been confused with the same chapters.
Okay. Yeah, this is a really old. I've had this for like 30 years, so. Mm-hmm. Oh, did it? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So, but you say they still call them the wreckers? He calls them the wreckers? Okay. It says a title of ferocious devilry. She said it's in 6. Which, okay. Oh, okay. I am so sorry. All right, it's going to be this way for 2 more weeks too. All right, you're just going to have to trust me, I guess. This book 3. You know what, guys? Let's come back and just keep moving ahead so we don't get sidetracked on this because we only have 15 minutes left. But thank you for alerting me. He just says this. He says, I behaved far more quietly than the wreckers. a title of ferocious devilry which the fashionable set chose for themselves. I had nothing whatever to do with their outbursts of violence, but I lived amongst them. Listen to this. Feeling a perverse sense of shame because I was not like them. I want to be the bad boy too. I'm bad, but I'm not that bad. And you know, right? For some reason, this isn't a very good analogy, I guess. It's the opposite. It's the flip side. Peter warming himself by the fire and denying Jesus. He doesn't want to be associated, you know, with Jesus. Augustine wants to be associated with these people because he wants people to think he's even more extreme than he is.
It's like wanting, like, I can't say this with any authority at all, but like with, like, if there's like a gang of bullies and wanting to be like them just so that you can feel like you have power over
Yes.
other people.
And so that you're in the in crowd. Everybody wants to be in the in crowd. We all want to be accepted by some sort of group. We just do. It makes us feel bad when there's a group and it doesn't accept us. It just does. Yeah. And in Augustine's case, looking good meant being bad, you know, because that was the prevailing climate in Carthage. And so, but he picks up a book by Cicero, the Hortensius. This book is lost. We don't know what is in Hortensius. But apparently it was some sort of dialogue written by Cicero on philosophy. And Augustine loved it. He's like, philosophy, I like that. He says, it altered my outlook on life. This book by Cicero. It changed my prayers to you, O Lord, and provided me with new hopes and aspirations. All my empty dreams suddenly lost their charm, and my heart began to throb with a bewildering passion for the wisdom of eternal truth. I began to climb out of the depths to which I had sunk in order to return to you. For I did not use the book as a whetstone to sharpen my tongue. I didn't use it as Cicero's going to teach me to be a better writer and speaker. Wasn't that what attracted him? It was not the style, but the contents which won me over. And so God uses a pagan orator, Cicero, to draw Augustine's eyes up away from the wreckers, away from the hissing cauldron of lust, to see something better. It's not the good. It's not God, but it's better. It's better. And leads him. Now, at the same time, he decides to finally pick up the scriptures and read some Bible. What does he think of it? This is my next question I asked you. What does he think of the scriptures? Yeah, it's lame. That's lame compared to Cicero. Cicero's awesome. Scriptures, meh. Not the greatest authors. Not great style. He didn't like it. He said, to me, they seemed quite unworthy of comparison with the stately prose of Cicero. Because, and this is his reason, listen to his reason. He has two problems. Because I had too much conceit to accept their simplicity. I'm too proud. Well, if anything's worthwhile, it must be really difficult, and, you know, and the syntax and the vocabulary and everything must be really lofty. I had too much conceit, and he says, and not enough insight to penetrate their depths. I was too proud to appreciate something written simply on the surface, and too dense to see that scripture is infinitely deep, and you can dig and dig and dig, and it has more and more glories to show you. So I'd rather read Cicero. Yes.
People who don't understand it and to reveal the good of the scriptures to Christians who understand it. Which is why he probably felt that.
Yeah. So his study of philosophy brings up certain problems. I'm not even going to bother to tell you where it is because I'm so sorry. And he wants to find some sort of religious home for his heart. He doesn't really think it's Monica's Christian church. But there's got to be somewhere people who are really deep thinkers and can answer my questions. Questions like he says, what Monica's his mother. What was the origin of evil? Why is there evil in the world? Whether God was confined to the limits of a bodily shape. Is God a material substance? And whether men could be called just if they had more than one wife at the same time, or killed other men, or sacrificed living animals. What he means is, why did people in the olden days, like Old Testament times, why could they marry many people and we didn't? We don't. Why some of them, David killed Uriah. He did, but what's up with that? Or why were they sacrificing animals? Nobody sacrifices animals anymore. And he's troubled by this. What did you say, Carson? Yes. And he's looking for someone who will answer his questions. And the older Augustine answers them. Okay, he says, I didn't know that evil is nothing but the removal of good until finally no good remains. I didn't know that God is a spirit, a being without bulk and without limbs defined in length and breadth. And then he says, I didn't know that the law, that God's arrangement with people changes over time. He says, although that by God's law, Abraham and Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and David were just men, although they have been reckoned sinners by men who are not qualified to judge. For they try them by human standards and assess all the rights and wrongs of the human race by the measure of their own customs. I point this out particularly because this is a bee in my bonnet. We live in a people who are massively judging people who live in other time periods by today's standards. They're all wicked. They're all wicked. We're going to tear down their statues. They're evil. But Augustine says we can't do that. Jacob had 4 wives. If somebody had 4 wives today, they're either a Mormon or, what a bigamist has 2 wives. What, a quadruplist? There's a word for that? We say that's wrong. That's illegal. But I say Jacob's fine. Do you know what I mean? God had a different arrangement. They had different insight than we have. I'm not better. You know what I mean? I have a different viewpoint. I have different insight. So when Augustine says we go judging David and Abraham and Isaac and all of these guys by our standards, by his modern standards in the year 400 AD, we do them a disservice. And I thought that was interesting. But this is the old Augustine saying, these are my answers. But the young Augustine has no answers. And I'm looking for people who will have answers. And I think I found them. Oh, yay. They are the Manichees. I've joined a heresy. Yay. My mom will be so proud. I've joined the heretics. And we talked about these. Eusebius mentioned them. And this weird paragraph. It says, I don't know that it'll do any good. I'm in book 310 for me, but chapter 10 for me, but I don't know that that's the same. I was gradually, and this is not at the very beginning, but pretty close to the beginning. I was gradually led to believe such nonsense as that a fig wept when it was plucked, and that the tree which bore it shed tears of mother's milk. But if some sanctified member of the sect were to eat the fig, someone else, of course, would have committed the sin of plucking it. He would digest it and breathe it out again in the form of angels or even particles of God, retching them up as he groaned in prayer. These particles of the true and supreme God were imprisoned in the fruit and could only be released by means of the stomach and teeth of one of the elect. I kid you not, this is what these people believed. All good and evil were mixed up like marbles in a jar, and all the colors are mixed together, and all things, all have good and evil mixed up. And so you pluck the fruit or whatever, but the elect, the special ones, if they eat it and grind it up and digest it, the particles will split and they're releasing good into the universe. But woe to you if you are not one of the elect and you pick the fruit off the tree because now you've killed it. You've killed it, but it's okay for the elect to eat it. I know. Hannah's laughing, and you should laugh. Okay. Oh, yeah, tell everybody what page. Yeah, this is the Manichees. They're nutty. It's an Eastern Manny was the name of the guy. Yes.
At the top,
Karsten deciphered where we are in chapters and stuff.
Okay, well,
at the top of the page, there's the 3 capital Roman they do have 3 numbers. There's the capital Roman numerals, and that's the book. There's lowercase Roman numerals, and that's
the chapter
that are in that book. And then there's parentheses with digits.
okay, thank you, Karsten. Okay. Let's finish up, and then I'll grab the book and I'll show everybody. And does everybody see what he means? Or okay, then we don't need to show you. So before I let you go, what does Monica do for Augustine while he joins this stupid Manichaean sect and keeps sleeping around? Prays. She prays. She also goes to the local bishop. I told you the story last week. Please, will you talk to my son? He has joined a cult. He is going down a bad road. And the bishop says, no, I will not talk to him. He's not ready. It will drive him away if I come and start, chewing him out and telling him. And she says, please. And he says to her, look, you need to leave. I'm not going to do it, but it is not possible that the son of so many tears could be lost. And then she has a vision, she has a dream, and she's standing on a rule, like a ruler, and a man is there, like an angel, and he says to her, where you are, your son will be. And she looked and she saw Augustine standing next to her on this ruler, this big ruler. And she told him, and he said, well, Mom, maybe that means you're going to become a Manichee someday. And we'll be in the same place. She said, no, it did not say where you are, I will be. It said, where I am, he will be. And she hung on to that. She's going to have her faith sorely tested in books 4 through 6, because it's not going to get better right away. Read 4 through 6, write the Crea on his saying. If you start doing that, if you have any questions, I can't figure out what the difference between an example and a testimony, call me or email me and I will be glad to tell you, okay? Otherwise, have a lovely week and I'll see you next time.